Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate you coming online here, and especially to Steve. I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Thorne, aka Flight Chops, Canadian aviator and filmmaker from Ontario, Canada. Steve has been on the YouTube for quite a while. I think he said something like 10 plus years, maybe. He has over 334,000 subscribers, and there's been 47 million views on YouTube to date. Over 44 aircraft have been highlighted in his videos. And right now, one of the things that Steve is working on is a project on a Vans RV-14. Steve, thank you very much for joining us, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is great. One of the things that I had written down here, how did this all begin? I've read a few things, but how did this all get started on YouTube?
So the dawn of it was went through the period between 2005 and 2009 where I wasn't flying. I had gotten my license in the mid 90s and just kind of living in Toronto, renting a 172 and flying around the CN Tower and doing the city tour was kind of the mission. That's kind of all I was doing. And, it got to a point where I started asking myself, I need something to make myself better. I can't keep, it's fun. It's cool to do this mission, but if you fly the same flight again and again, you're not stretching. Like I had the clearance and the requests and stuff memorized to the point where I just knew the script of how it was going to go to get the clearance for the city tour and so on. So around 2005, it got to the point of buying a house and getting married and having a kid, and all those things were starting to happen in that period before 2009. And I wasn't flying for like 4 years. Just had lost the kind of passion for it, or, just let it go. When that happens, you kind of lose currency, and then there's no real, the way it works as a rental pilot here, I think it's probably similar there, is you kind of got to maintain a certain minimum amount for insurance for rentals. And then if you skip it, then you got to just go fly with an instructor. So once you miss it, I feel like the kind of impetus to fly every month is gone. And then 6 months go by, a year goes by, and then 4 years go by. So that's what happened. But in that period between 2005 and 2009, a couple of major things happened in the world of internet and aviation. Everything. The iPad became a thing, and GoPros became a thing. So with those two things, I started debriefing flights and enjoying the fact that digital charts were a thing. And I saw how quickly I could improve upon things by looking at a GoPro footage of a debrief, which was just so novel at the time. Where previous to that, I never had really done a video debrief of a flight. So I think one of the pivotal things was I showed a friend that I had been doing the city tour, and I noticed there was a controller that seemed a little kind of pissy with me. And I was like, I don't know why that controller was having a bad day or something. But then when I got back and looked at the footage, I saw that they had tried to call me 3 times, but my passenger was talking over it. And I just had missed 3, or I guess the third call was when I finally noticed. So if I hadn't debriefed the video, I may not have ever noticed that was in fact why the controller was mad at me. And, I just really solidified in my briefing. Like I've always do the thing where I say, I'm going to raise my finger and you just stop talking to my passenger. Like there's going to be so much chatter, you're not going to know what's going on. But if I raise my finger, just stop. Because if I even spend the time to tell you to be quiet, that's enough that I may miss whatever bit of the call I'm hearing. I thought I had done that on that flight, but maybe I didn't, whatever. So point is that video debrief really solidified that. And I shared it with a couple of pilot friends and said, I really learned from this debrief. And it really kind of became the conversation of sharing it more widely. And just kind of as a private pilot, just trying to get better. So, I was watching YouTube and checking it out at that time, and there was a lot of stuff going on in the world of aviation on YouTube that was very across the board. There was lack of context, a lot of stuff that was really, what are you looking at? I remember seeing a video early on that was a guy doing stall recoveries in a 172 using a ton of aileron and like demonstrating it like as if he was an instructor. And it's like, there's no context here. I don't know who this guy is. I'm not an expert by any means, but I know that's wrong. So what am I looking at? And that really inspired me to think, if I'm going to do something like this, I'm just going to really bathe it in context and make it clear. Like, I'm just a private pilot sharing some debriefs here, and let's just make this the beginning of a conversation. And the brand was all based on a joke, honestly. A friend of mine drew it on a napkin because I play drums and worked on drum chops, when you're trying to get better. And I had the goofy mustache at the time just as a joke for November. And it just kind of, the brand was born purely as a self-deprecating joke, honestly, that I was going to just be this pilot to, you know, I'm not showing the cool side of it. I'm just showing myself struggling and trying to learn and get better. And that just kind of really expanded into tailwheel and all kinds of other stuff that I shared the training and you know, those moments of like, you know, and we all go through that in your training where you're like, what the hell, man? That, you know, those moments where you feel like it's not working are oftentimes the moments where you break through, and just kind of being vulnerable to share that was kind of the birth of the whole thing.
What ratings do you currently hold?
Currently it's private single IFR multi night in Canada. I've done night rating. I've got enough float to get the rating, but I did most of it in the States, so I technically couldn't do the flight test because I have the American restricted, whatever you call it, license that you can't add ratings to.
Oh.
So I did the whole thing up to the flight test and did the Beaver left seat checkout and flew around in the Beaver with the instructor with his arms crossed. So it's like, you're qualified, but we can't actually do the flight test. So, and I guess tailwheel, we have that as a rating here as well, or an endorsement. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then of course a bunch of Warbird stuff, which I don't even know how to qualify that or what that. But that definitely feels like a different category of flying. And started helicopter, not too far in, but felt like I could definitely get a hold of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Wow. Of all the different aircraft that you've flown, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty common question, and it's a difficult one to answer. You did the math. I didn't even know it was 44 on the site there. I don't know how you figured that out, but it's something in the neighborhood of 50-ish that I've got stick time in now. I think probably because of my history of the T6 or the Harvard, growing up, I really early on learned what that represented. That airplane was the gateway to the Warbirds. And as a young private pilot that didn't know what the hell he was doing, I found a place that had them, and I showed up to like a weekend ground school course that it was like, you know, sign up and take the ground school. They kind of were letting anybody do the ground school. Like, you don't even have to be a pilot, just for like a history lesson type thing. And I showed up thinking I'm going to do this ground school and do the training and fly that airplane just like my grandpa did. And I didn't understand at the time how hilariously unprepared I was. And they weren't mean to me or anything, but they made it super clear that I was completely out of my mind to think that I was showing up prepared to like, you can't just jump into this with no tailwheel time. What are you even thinking? So that was like 20 years ago when I did that course. And I really walked out of there thinking, well, there's a history lesson of a thing I'll never get to do. Because they just taught us that it's like the pilot maker, and it's this really difficult airplane, and it was designed to be hard, and it is scary, and it's a 6,000-pound tail dragger and radial engine with supercharger and all the complexity that goes along with it to make you prepared for the fighters. So I spent 20 years just assuming I would never get a chance. So I kind of slowly built up my tailwheel experience, and then did get the opportunity. And I was physically shaking on my first lesson in the front seat of that airplane, just because the instructor that I was working with was like, look, you're prepared, you know what you're doing, and we don't put people in the seat that aren't, but I need you to realize I'm going to be coaching you from back here, but if you really pooch it, like, we're going to go for a ground loop ride together. Like, you know, the back seater can't really save it if the front seater totally blows it in the T6. Like, you really don't put someone in that seat unless you know they're going to be able to do it. And it's their washout rate. You know, it is what it is. But so facing that and getting through that, and now being able to fly the airplane probably represents the biggest kind of achievement, or the thing I have the most pride in. It's you know, it's just such a different feeling airplane than a lot of other things like a Cub or a, you know, that are more kind of lively. It's kind of a beast, but when you get on the right side of the curve of that airplane, I do feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm not scared of it like I was almost every time I strapped in for the first 24 hours, how many hours it was before I started realizing, hey, it wasn't shaking this time. But it's still a lot. Like, I still really respect that airplane. So probably that's the one for those reasons. But you know, jumping into like a Super Cub is just so freeing. It's so fun. Like, there's just nothing in the way. It's just you and stick and rudder, and there's almost nothing. the T6 is something like that in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of complexity to manage as well. Like I remember the experience of getting into the first time I flew in one was with the Aeroshell team in 2015. And I remember getting in, and my feeling of it was I just kept getting in like that. Anyone who has not sat in a T6, I mean, if you have, it's just you get in there and it's deep and dark, and there's like a zillion gauges and levers and all the bare hydraulics. So it's a monster, and I just felt like. I remember in the video, I say to the pilot, like as we're taxiing, I'm like, man, this is a lot of airplane. And then the quiet part that I didn't say out loud was, and I'll never fly one. Like I started thinking, this is too much, man. This is too much. So probably just to have gotten through that and be able to maintain currency on that airplane is probably one of the things that I just didn't think I would ever. And again, it's the channel that really created the opportunities to get me there.
Yeah, I watched that episode towards the end there when you were getting your rating and the wind didn't cooperate that day and the weather was really bad. That was quite a video that you put together. Now,
the one where I scrubbed in the helmet, the first helmet flight. Was that one, or which plane was that in?
Yeah, you had that new helmet. Yep, you did. I remember that now.
Yeah, that was a good case of get there itis too, because I really wanted to test fly with the helmet for the first time, and I scrubbed it because the winds were exceeding the ops limit.
Yep, I remember that. Now for your multi-engine, was that in the DC-3?
I did the rating because I got the opportunity to get some training in the DC-3 and the Beech 18. So I decided I want to show up prepared for this. So I did the rating in the Seneca 1.
Okay.
So the original Seneca with the heavy controls. So that's what we have here locally. So I was able to get the rating done in that.
Okay.
So in Canada, we do a Vfr Multi Rating, which you can do separate from instrument. I don't know if it's different in the States, but you can get your multi VFR, which is a little bit weird apparently in the US. I think a lot of people just do multi IFR all at once. But anyway, I didn't do the multi IFR. So I have multi VFR and IFR single. So I just have to go do a flight test in a multi-engine airplane and fly the single engine approach to like get that box checked off.
Okay. All right. Good. And then I was reading IFR. Are you working on your IFR right now, or you've got it?
Finally got it. So I got it at the right at the beginning of 2020. I did the flight test in January.
Okay.
But I had been working on it for like literally 5 years. I think I started properly working on it in 2015, but I just kept getting distracted, So in the end, I decided I'm going to commit to this public making content about the rating. So I did the instrument rating status vlog. So there's like 12 episodes that are branded a little differently with the thumbnails that follow that process through the year of 2019, basically, is how long it kind of took. And I just showed those moments of pulling your hair out and studying for the written test and all that stuff. That was the way I finally got it done, by just forcing myself to actually make content about the process that didn't have to be polished as much as some of the other stuff that I was doing was.
Okay. Now you're building a Vans RV14. I did watch a few episodes of that where you guys, I don't know if you cut it or you filed for the
a little too much yeah, we're trying to make room for it. So yeah, I mean, anyway, so that again is the same thing. I'm kind of sharing the process as unpolished as possible and just really being transparent about what that is like. And I'm lucky to have the opportunity to be building it with a team of guys. Some of them are retired that have the experience, have done it before, which is what happened in that case. That was, I guess, the 13th episode. Build vlog number 13 is like 2 episodes ago. If you check that out, we're working on getting the elevator travel. So Perry, the main, he's the project leader, basically. He has built an RV7, and what he did wasn't wrong. It's just that it wasn't technically there wasn't an answer in the books, like to get the right elevator travel. It gave us a range and we weren't there. We were at 26 degrees, we're supposed to be at 30. So he did what he did in the RV7, which was, grind out a little notch and it's, the short answer is it was okay because I sent everything to Vans to show them what we had done, because I was kind of uncomfortable at the time, but I'm like, he's my senior mentor and I believe him. And it wasn't really until I was editing that I got deep into auditing the instructions. I'm like, I can't publish this until I really dig into it. And then when I contacted Vans, they're like, yeah, okay, let's measure it, let's get pictures, and let's really confirm you guys didn't go too far. But in his defense, Vans had published a secondary document that was not in the manuals that is on their website, which we should be checking frequently, but it's hard to stay on top of all that. There was actually an amendment that said you can have up to 5-degree range. So in fact, our 26 degrees would have been acceptable. That's the irony. So now we have maximum travel, even though if we had 26 degrees, it would have been okay because the range was 25 to 30. It's because the elevator horns on the tube don't line up perfectly. So they end up hitting. It's just because of a welding thing. It's very difficult, I guess, for them to weld those perfectly to be all symmetrical. So we had a case where that was what caused our travel to be limited. So anyway, it resulted in Vans is going to change their system where they're going to actually print that amended document now and send it with all the tail kits. So it's been kind of interesting. Like as we do these things, we're kind of helping the community grow and learn with us, and even to have that type of a thing impact Vans process. So that was cool.
Good. I had read that you had said my best landing ever, and it was in a glider. Do you remember that? Can you recall what happened there?
That was that yeah. So I guess talking about primacy and training and so on. I did my first solo in a glider at Schweitzer 233, and working toward power. That was where I wanted to get, but I enjoyed flying gliders. So that first summer, I didn't finish the license. I just got solo and got my student permit. And then as soon as kind of I could, I went to power and didn't go back to gliding, which I've always wanted to. Just, it's a day of flying. Like it's just more work. It's difficult, right? To be at a gliding club, you got to show up in the morning and help take planes out and help put them away. You can't just show up and fly and leave. So it's just difficult schedule wise. That's really why I haven't gone back to it. I love it. But anyway, so what happened was as a cocky kind of youngster who had a few hours of solo time now, I had done a flight on a Saturday where we were paying by 500-foot increments for our tow up to 2,000, typically, where they would dump you off. They would wag the wings, say, let go. The Saturday I had dumped off at 1,500 when I felt the thermal and managed to keep it up for like 2 hours. And the only reason why I came down was to go to the bathroom. And then on the Sunday, it was very similar conditions. I did the same thing, but I just spent half an hour, 45 minutes, just struggling, just going from cloud to cloud. I wasn't climbing. I was basically somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 feet, just was not climbing. Like the previous day I'd gone to like 6,000. It was really awesome. But anyway, I guess that story is, I realized I was like 5 minutes or miles away from base at this point. And I'm like, I'm not making it back and I'm not climbing. So now I've really screwed myself. And I remember this calm came over me once I snapped into my training, and I just picked a field. And I remember noticing there was like a dark perpendicular line in the field. And I thought that might be a ditch. So I'm going to land right past it. And I just remember watching that ditch go by as I heard the grass like start touching it was just the best landing I've ever done, and applying the training, just doing it the way you're trained, and the panic went away. But I remember like as it stopped, I have this distinct memory of looking at the windshield and seeing the spit on the windshield from when I was yelling at myself before I had like snapped into the training. And then the realization of like, now I'm going to have to buy everybody steaks and beer because that's the rules. If you land out, they have to send a truck and guys have to come take the wings off and you're in trouble. But then I heard the tow plane come by, and because I radioed in roughly where I was before I went out of range. And he did a couple passes and then he landed in the same field, and he came over and he said, "You want to fly it out?" And I was like, "Hell no." Like I was shaking. He was like, "Cool, I brought someone," because I figured that might be the case. So they flew it out. And then when the truck showed up with all the guys, the plane was gone. And they're like, "You're lucky." So I didn't have to buy the steaks and beers that night. So I picked a good field, and I just distinctly remember that really solidified early in my training, like believe your training and apply your training. And I've, because I know a lot of friends who, fly 172s or whatever, and their instincts are get back to the airport, like if there's a problem. And that's, if you got to put it in the field, you got to put it in the field, and you got to be prepared to actually do it. So I'm lucky that I have actually done it, you know, in the context of like as a student landing a 233. That's not a cross country glider guy with lots of experience, just like picking a field and putting it down. Like this was a serious decision to do it and not make it back to base. So I was lucky I did that so early in my experience. The one downside to having gliding as a primacy thing is that I get in a lot of, I've gotten feedback, let's say, from instructors who are like, cool that you saved that landing, but why didn't you just go around? Whatever, right? If it was just something wasn't right, or it was just like, I typically will fight to save a landing because my primacy is you get one shot in a glider. And it's hard to remember, like the go around is in your toolbox with power. Just if you don't like it, go around. So I've tried to remember to tell myself that, like, you know, when is it a tool to pull out? So primacy is a real thing. It's interesting to see how that applies.
Good. I read that your motto is learning from small mistakes to avoid making big ones.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, that's definitely, I guess, what these stories are based on. I try to really, I guess when I start a lot of talks, I typically will ask people who in this room thinks they're current. And, you know, if I was in the room, I'd ask you all that and see how many people put their hands up. And I'm like, okay, cool. So what does that mean? Do you fly a 1 hour a month? Most hands go up, and 2 hours a month and less hands go up, or whatever. So, okay, so cool. And how many people log more than just like a line in your logbook that says, you know, whatever, it was windy and I took the kids to get a burger, and then you hang up the keys? Is that the extent of your debrief, or do you actually do a debrief that really breaks down how'd the flight go, what was good, what was bad, what are you gonna do next time, what were the actual winds? Because if you don't remember, when was the last time you faced a direct crosswind of 15 knots for real? Because there's going to come a time when you're heading into a place where that's what it's blowing and you're like, I think that's my personal minimum. It's like, is it? Because if it's been 6 months since you faced a crosswind like that, maybe you shouldn't be doing that flight today. And if you don't know, if you don't debrief it that way, so I do keep track of where I'm at with, you know, I keep all my kind of basic notes in mind of like, so for instance, the Harvard, I'm maintaining currency in that thing. I have flown in a direct crosswind of 19. I know that, but I'm not going to do that when I haven't flown it for 40 days or whatever, which is what I did last time I went and flew it, just because I've been so busy. I did push it. Our limits at the museum are 60 days. They want to see us do 3 takeoffs and landings every 60 days. I'm personally trying to keep it more like once a month minimum. I fly it, and I do more than 3 landings. This was a case where I was over 40, and I didn't fly the first time I was there because I was building. It was a busy day. I was pretty tired. And then when I got the time to fly, the winds were a little gusty and a little high, and it was a bit of a crosswind. And I was like, you know what? Don't need to. I'm coming back in a few days. If it's good, I'll just fly it then. And that's what I did. And it was a pretty calm day. It was almost too calm. Remember the tower was like, wow, those ones look good. And I said to him, yeah, you know, it's actually harder when there's not enough wind, because without a discernible, with not being sure where the wind's coming from, when you're in a big tail dragger like that, it's hard to know where should I put the controls, because I don't, you know, if it's a little bit off this side, a little bit off that side, it's like, well, what is it? I just want to know where I'm putting the stick once I'm slowing down. Yep.
Well, now, besides working on the RV14 project, what are some of the things that you say, hey, I haven't done this yet, I want to do a YouTube on this, or what are your goals and projects coming up?
Well, I mean, 2020 was supposed to be a lot of international stuff.
Oh, that's right.
Things
Iceland.
planned. Yeah, we had a lot of things planned, so that was pretty frustrating. We did get a few things done. Mexico and Sweden did a bunch of general aviation stuff in those 2 countries. Did Alaska the year before, which I'm still publishing. A bunch of stuff in the DHC2 Beaver, which was definitely bucket list type stuff.
I watched that a couple weeks ago. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that it's funny because that airplane does seem like a beast, but it actually does fly super easy. It's good that I did all the basic training in the underpowered PA-12, where you actually have to think about rolling a float, you know, getting on step and all that stuff. But in an I guess if you really load up a Beaver, then maybe it's a different story. But of course, we weren't near max gross. So when I finally got to fly the Beaver, it was like, oh my God, this thing is just it just produces so much lift, and it's so beautiful, so easy to fly. It was just so awesome. So I don't really have, I mean, I guess I want to get the multi-IFR. The plan is to do that in a DA-42 or a DA-62, working with Diamond Aircraft, just to get it on the glass, G1000, and knock that out, because all my instrument stuff was 6-pack and, minimal. I had a 430, like a GNS, just basic GPS. So I can do IFR with 6-pack, and what I want to do now is get comfortable with glass. And then moving forward, that's what the RV-14 is going to be. And then it's going to be sort of about figuring out how to create content with larger mission planning in a pretty good, fast cross-country machine, which is what that airplane represents.
Okay. I'd like to open up the questions to the membership. Anybody has any questions for Steve?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the level of honesty and depth that you put into the videos you produce. There's a lot of personal insight that not a lot of pilots producing videos out there provide, and just your videos overall are very, very complete with details and very informative. So I've appreciated them quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, it's been rewarding to do it and make myself vulnerable to the small amount of attacks that might lead to, has largely led to just invitations to meet people and work with people to tell their stories or fly their airplane or whatever. I think because they see that, I just truly want to just learn it and share the learning. I don't want to hide, because I've worked with some of these other creators that don't want to show themselves look vulnerable, and they argue about what we're going to show. And it's like, unless it's illegal, like I'm happy to show something that didn't go well. And that's where the value is to me. But yeah, I can see a lot of type A people that don't ever want to appear vulnerable, don't want to do that. And that to me is, I don't find that interesting either. So glad you enjoy it.
And are you going to paint the RV before or after you go to Oshkosh?
There is no chance it's going to be painted before Oshkosh. Zero. It's going to be the best polishing job we can do, which won't be great because it's got some scratches, because we ain't, the best builders. The plan was always to paint it, so we didn't like baby it too much. Yeah. It's going to be polished as best we can, and then vinyl basic stuff just for, the branding for the museum and the sponsors that are, component sponsors. I'm going to figure out some basic branding and make it super clear, like this is not a painted airplane. But yeah, no way it'll be painted, and I'm just hoping that we can actually get through the flight test and then apply for the airworthiness to actually cross the border with it all before July. We're close, but it's going to be tight.
The same 40 hours you have to fly off up there?
I think it's 25 here. We have to do 25 trouble-free hours. Then we have to apply for, so we get a limited certificate of airworthiness for that period, which I guess is similar to your phase 1. Then we can apply for the real whatever airworthiness, which may or may not have a VFR limitation initially or something. I have to work through that. And if that's the case, fine, I'll just go VFR. It's probably what I'll do anyways to get the AirVenture. It just would be nice to have the IFR option if I'm confident with the setup, to just make it most of the way to Chicago or whatever, and then wait for the window to go VFR to get in. I'm supposed to get there on the Thursday or the Friday before the thing starts, because the airplane is supposed to be at the Garmin booth. So I'm under a bit of pressure to actually make it. So I'm going to try my best not to get theiritis and go with a big enough window to have it be stress-free as much as possible in a brand new airplane. But I'm hoping to get comfortable with it during those hours while we work out the bugs. And yeah, we're right there. We're so close. Like, we've got the engine running now, and we're still working out a few bugs before we can apply for the final inspection to then get it going for the airworthiness flight tests.
Cool.
Hey, I've got a question, if it's okay. Actually, I got 2 questions, but I don't want to hog the time. My first one is, of all your content, right? And I've watched a lot of it, but obviously not everything. Which video, Steve, would you say would be the one where you'd want every pilot, like, grab them by the collar and say, dude, you gotta watch this because it was stellar? Is there one video that stands out?
It's not, I mean, I think I'm approaching 250 at this point.
Yeah.
So I can't like they're all like little babies that I've let out into the world, and
Yeah.
they still get views and engagement, and it's still fun to see comments on old stuff that
Okay.
I still have pride in. I mean, there's stuff I wish I did better, but it's like, yeah, but at the time I didn't have the energy or the resources to dedicate. So I don't regret, you know, some of the quality of the earlier ones that aren't as polished as the newer ones, because it's like I just didn't have the budget and I wasn't going to put that into it. I had a real job that I had to, like, I'm able to do this full time now, so I can put a lot more energy into that than I could 5 years ago or 6 years ago before I made the transition.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It really, because it's so varied, which is also cool. It really, it's almost like I ask people like, what are you into? And then I can point them to something I've done that's maybe something they might be interested in. I know some people just have zero interest in the Warbirds, which doesn't compute for me, because to me, that's the core. That's like the ultimate flying. It's like, that is where man and machine were like matched. Because when you get into fighters now, it's like the human is a bag of meat that's like a liability. The jet can do so much more. It's like, get out. Like I don't need you. I'm just gonna G lock you. Whereas, and they're so automated, they can do everything without a person in there anyway. But you get to a Warbird where it's like you can go 400 knots and you can pull 9 Gs, but the airplane can't do any of it without the pilot.
Yeah.
So you have this like super high performance airplane that is super complex, but all of it is manual. Like you have to have a really good aviator at the controls. And I see a lot of these guys that fly, and it's no offense to anybody that flies complex stuff that's, you know, automated. But when I do some of these talks where I get guys crossing their arms, don't think they need tail wheel. And, you know, I did a talk for like the Mooney pilot group where I got that reaction from some guys who are like, I fly a Mooney, I don't need tail wheel.
Mhm.
And, but then some of the guys in the group are like, well, I fly tail wheel and it actually makes me better in my Mooney. But until you do it, you don't know it. And it's that case where it's like not knowing what you don't know. Like I like to know enough about a thing to know I don't know enough. You know what I mean? Whereas the people that think they know it, it's like, yeah, you don't know enough to know you don't know it. That's not a good place to be. So it's interesting to me to see how many people get turned off by the Warbird stuff. Where like, that is not a 172. I can't relate to it at all.
Interesting.
Okay. But I've run into it and I don't get it. But well, I mean, I get it now because I've run into it enough that I get it, but I don't get it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think if I got to vote, it was when you did your biennial with that Dan Greider guy, when he was showing you the, you know, push the yoke down and engine fail. I must have forwarded that seriously, man, to 25 guys. Because I thought that was such a good video, just unique. I don't know what you
Yeah, what's
thought.
interesting, yeah, I mean, that training was great. And I mean, what I think what was sobering for me was how many power pilots don't have that as a primacy.
Yeah.
But I did glider training as primacy, and we did rope breaks on you know, winch launch and also just on the tow plane. They drilled that into us because they're not going to send you solo in a glider unless you know the minute the rope breaks, you put the nose down. That is it. And then you decide what you're going to do. So for me, the primacy was there, but I understood that the validity of that as far as GA, a lot of pilots will be in a climb attitude. They'll lose power and they'll start troubleshooting it before they pitch down. Like they freeze up and they look for like mags, mixture, what's going on? And then you've lost your energy. It's like, you're at 300 feet, dude. You're not looking for mags mixture. You're putting the nose down. So I guess, again, I'm lucky that I started the way I did. So that is definitely my primacy, 100%. And it's interesting because I made a mistake in the Harvard related to the helmet, which is a video I'm going to be publishing soon, where I was just doing a bunch of landings on the shorter runway where I don't like to do touch and goes in that airplane. I want a full stop every time just to really get the value, because you will typically ground loop an airplane like that around 40 to 30 knots. Like that's typically where it goes bad. So if you're doing touch and goes, you're not even getting into that place where you really need the value of slowing it down and stopping. So on the short runway, I just asked for stop and taxi back. I don't even know what the right way to ask for that clearance is, but the tower knows what I want now. So it's not busy. So typically you can just spin the airplane around, taxi back, unlock the tail wheel, spin it around again and go. But there is this certain degree of urgency that I feel when I'm backtracking or back taxiing, whatever you guys call it in the States, on the active runway at a controlled airport. It doesn't feel right. So there's this bit of pressure to like get there and go. And on that particular day, it was a sunny day. I had the helmet, the big visor, and I'm still working it out. I'm not super experienced with it yet. And it's just funny that that small change, and again, little things to learn from. The guy who trained me on the helmet said, don't use the visor for takeoff and landing, just because it blocks your view a little bit. And if it breaks, if you do have an accident, you just don't need that to be there with sharp, whatever. But I hadn't really drilled that in. So I had the visor down. So looking down into the Harvard, it's difficult to see the fingers for the flaps. That's the only way that you can know. The gear and the flaps have a finger. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like a little thing that indicates, it's like this physical indicator in the cockpit. And you can't see the flaps because they're split flaps. So they're just coming off the bottom of the wings. So you have no idea what your flap position is unless you look at the fingers. This is like the 6th or 7th landing of the day, and it's all fine. I'm enjoying spinning the tail, like unlock the tail, spin it around, like doing an intentional ground loop basically, and figure that out, which is kind of weird and fun. So I'm just having fun. It's a good time. Tower is creating a little bit of urgency, like just let me know when you're ready to go, right? And on this particular one, he asked me before I got there if I was ready. I guess he wasn't looking or whatever. I'm like, well, I'm not even there yet. I haven't spun it around yet. No, I'm not ready. The other thing was that the last landing I had just done, I had done a full flap landing. You know, the flap lever thing in that airplane is like middle is locked, down is going down, and up is going up. So all the previous ones I'd done a bit of flap and then put back to neutral, bit of flap, put back to neutral. So it's not all the way down. So in that case, I had to go click, click to get it to go up. Because I had it all the way down, I just went click, one click, which only locks it. So I just locked it in full down. And I had my visor, which a lot of glare, it's farther away from your eyes. So it's not like sunglasses. So when you get a glare, it's really blocking a lot of your view, right? So I look down and I see in the video where I say to myself, I'm checking for pre-takeoff, going through my stuff, mags are on, prop is fine, flaps are up, flaps were not up. Spun it around. The guy had asked me if I was ready. So I'm feeling a bit of pressure. So I get it spun around, tell us how I'm ready, launch. And pretty quickly, I could tell something wasn't right. Like, I'm like checking my power. I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm not accelerating. And in that airplane, it's like 45 degrees of flaps plus the panel in the middle. Like that airplane has a lot of flaps. So full flaps in the T6, I'm trying to take off. And it does go because I'm not super heavy and I probably have half fuel at that point. But it's climbing away in this like really wonky attitude. Anyway, looking at the footage, I think it took 22 seconds for me to identify, holy shit, the flaps are down. So, and again, the problem is click, click. When you go up, it's this really powerful hydraulics. You have to like do it in stages or else it goes, they just suck up, like sucks up all your flaps in like seconds. So that happened because I reflexively put them up as I was climbing out over this neighborhood at like 300 feet. Terrible decision to put them up. But anyways, it was climbing. I should have just gone with it. It was just a weird attitude and I was kind of slow, but with all the flaps, who cares, right? I'm like, I'm going 85. I should be going 95. But with all those flaps, it's flying. But the minute I put them all up, now I'm in this big 6,000 pound airplane, 85 knots. I just sucked up my flaps, but I put the nose down as I did it. And I remember thinking and doing, as soon as I did it, I knew it was stupid, but I did the right thing. And I lost my climb for a second, but I didn't descend. And I got my speed back and continued on, full flaps, full power, or no flaps, full power, all fine, no harm done. But if I hadn't put the nose down when I did that, I just sucked up my flaps at 85 knots. Now I got lots of power on, all the power really. So now I'm in a situation where the torque could have pulled me over. I could have stalled it right then and there, climbing out over this neighborhood at 300 feet. It just so stupid. So I'm going to make a video called Expectation Bias and talk about how I looked at the flaps, expected them to be up, therefore they're up because I expect, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, so when you check something, if you expect it to be a certain position, that's bias. If it's not, and you go for it anyway, right? But there's a case where luckily I had the reflexive muscle memory to like push the nose down because I knew I was now in a bad spot where I'm slow, I'm not producing enough lift, and I just cleaned up the wings when I shouldn't have. So yeah, it's I don't know how I give that. I guess you're asking about that lesson of like loss of thrust or maintaining energy. It's all about pitch. You got to put the nose down, even if it doesn't seem like comfortable thing to do when you're looking at a neighborhood.
Hey, Steve, I've got a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One thing I like about your videos is that you have the different camera views that showing what you're doing. And you talked earlier about doing a personal debrief for each flight. What do you think is the best camera angle for a GoPro for a pilot to be able to do a good debrief with himself after a flight?
So yeah, that's a common question, and I have to always preface that with a question of like, what kind of airplane are you in?
It's a tail dragger, push plane.
So yeah, if you can get the over the shoulder shot that I found, and if you look at all my Super Cub stuff, I got a really cool shot that showed panel, instruments, control inputs as much as, I don't think you necessarily see the feet, but I got stick inputs and a bit of the view. The newer cameras have a good enough exposure latitude where they will get the view and the panel, which the earlier ones couldn't do. So I used to dedicate one panel, like one camera to the panel and then one camera to the view. I didn't try to have a camera get both because it was too bright outside or too dark inside. It couldn't get both. So now I do feel that the newer cameras can handle it. So if you can get that over the shoulder shot, that'll give you a lot to work with, and definitely tap in the intercom so you can hear yourself, talk you through what you're doing, or just, get the ATC. That will largely put you in a spot where you get most of what you need. I don't find the shot looking at yourself very useful. In fact, I initially planned on never using that shot because I felt like it was just vanity. But it was one of my director buddies that, when I did the Stearman training, convinced me to get that shot to capture like the joy of flying a Stearman for the first time. What that got for me though was I realized I could debrief where I was looking and when I was looking and how long I was looking there. Because with the Stearman, you can't see what you're doing in front of you. And so I was able to identify, like, I need to spend more time looking at the little pie slice than looking straight ahead and hoping that my peripheral vision is getting me something. Because that was kind of what I sort of did initially in the Stearman. I tried to like stare ahead at nothing because there's nothing to look at back of the instructor's head. And you get these little pie slices on the sides. That's what the Pitts or the Extra 300, even the Harvard is like that. Once you flare, the nose is complete cowl. There's nothing you can see in front of you. So being able to see my eyes, it's like, I'm not looking where I need to look at the right time. And that helped. So that's a good angle if you can add the other angles. But I definitely recommend the over the shoulder view and panel, because then you can look at the panel too. You can see what you're doing, how you're, altitude maintenance or whatever you want to look at debrief wise. You'll be able to read the instruments and see and control inputs. So you can tell, like, did I have my crosswind inputs on that one? And then you see the stick go neutral after landing. It's like, come on, do better than that. So yeah, I like to use that angle and discipline myself to be like, I want to see those control inputs, crosswind inputs the whole time on landing. And then the whole time on the takeoff roll, full deflection, and then slowly relax it as you get your speed up. I want to see that happening. Too many people are just chilling. They're not doing anything with control inputs on the runway because usually it doesn't matter. But if you get that sloppy, it's going to get you one of these days.
Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
Hey, Steve, really good to talk to you. I'm so glad you could join us. And Michael, thanks for putting this together. This is awesome. I'm a Mooney pilot who does have a tailwheel endorsement, and I took advantage of my Mooney being down for maintenance, and 6 months to get an engine overhauled, and got a tailwheel endorsement in a Cessna 140. And up here in Denver, you have to do that in the wintertime, I'm pretty sure.
Because it's Tennessee altitude.
Yeah, but it was great. And anyway, just, big fan. Been watching the videos for years. As some cameras all over my Mooney, people don't realize how much work goes into producing good content. And there's no end to content on YouTube, but there's not a lot of great content. And so thanks for being one of those guys producing the really, really good content.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for watching. It's rewarding to do it. And it's sometimes frustrating to deal with the volume now because the algorithm is really pushing clickbait. And I just don't want to do it. Like, I don't have any interest in doing that stuff. And, it's a really difficult place to be where you know, an episode gets boiled down to a title and a thumbnail. And, you know, it's like, I'm trying real hard to like pack in a bunch of, you know, learning moments or whatever nuggets into this 15, 20-minute video. How do you possibly boil that down to an exciting title and a thumbnail without a girl in it? So that's been the struggle. So I appreciate, you know, you guys that understand, like, I'm going to do my best to like make a title and a thumbnail that says what it is, but it's not going to be sensational per se most of the time. I mean, sometimes I get the opportunity to make it sensational because it is. And that's the other thing too, is like, I try real hard. If someone accuses me of clickbait, it's like, so what about this title or thumbnail do you feel didn't deliver? Right? Like clickbait, if you legitimately do that, it's something that isn't delivering what it says it's going to deliver. But having said that, I avoid the sensationalism. I just don't feel like it's worth it. And I've had a few videos that have exceeded 1 million views. And when that happens, it tends to not be quality viewers. So it ends up being a mess of like managing comments. So I kind of would rather not, honestly. So I'm super happy if a video hits like 50 to 100,000 views, and it's like dedicated community members. And then, you know, anything above that starts to be in a place of diminishing returns where it's people that didn't watch the whole video. They just clicked on it and, you know, you got the view count, but then they write a stupid comment that asks a question that's in the video. I don't have a lot of patience for that, because it's like, look, man, and I get it. It's like a 15-minute video, but if you're going to ask a question or making an, you know, some type of accusation that is answered in the video, it's difficult for me to put the energy into answering the comment. So yeah, I try to make it just quality and aim it at you guys that want the quality and aren't looking for the quick, silly, you know, vacuous entertainment.
Hey, all we need is just Flight Chop's new video.
Well, okay. But I mean, so the challenge is they don't send notifications anymore. So YouTube is all about suggested videos now. So you got to look yourself, even if you're a subscriber, it won't tell you have published. It's like, yeah, I don't think you want to see that. That's not exciting. Because if you look at what's being suggested to you, it's not necessarily going to be my new video, even if you're a subscriber.
Any other questions out there, members?
I've got one more. Again, I apologize if I'm hogging your time, Steve, but I'm starting the last 6 months to really get into flight simulation using X-Plane and trying to get muscle memory on GPS and functionality and so forth, and practicing instrument approaches. What are your thoughts on that, Steve? I love the video where you murdered the people in Oshkosh.
I got accused of faking that.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. I mean, what kind of actor would you have to be to fake that?
Yeah,
and
right.
why would you want to? Like, that was embarrassing.
Yeah.
So that was a case where, if anyone hasn't seen that video, it's a good one to watch, because it does simulate a lot of what happens at AirVenture with get-there-itis type stress. But that was a case where the sim failed me, in the sense that I have this really cool G1000 like physical panel from Real Sim Gear that's got all the buttons and knobs, and it's amazing for a procedural trainer, just like what you're talking about with muscle memory. It's like, that's what I wanted. And I got a 430 unit also from Real Sim Gear when I was preparing for my instrument flight tests. So like, really was using the physical knobs and buttons. I don't want to use the mouse and try to like click the little knob and the big knob, and then to me that's not valuable. So the new gear that is physically, that you can turn it and work with it, that's amazing value. That AirVenture video was just a case where I was trying to do a VFR thing where my sim wasn't really set up great for looking around. So I just got screwed up and got on the wrong runway, because I was trying to look at this G1000 panel in front of me, which I'm not super familiar with still. I need to spend more time with that. But all the information was in front of me. It's just that I was trying to do VFR work, and that's not where a sim is strong. I don't, even when you have it set up well, sims are not good for VFR, I don't feel, and they're not good for stick and rudder at all, frankly, right? It's just, there's no feedback, there's no feel. But what it is good for is procedural training, exactly what you're talking about. Instrument stuff, amazing, right? Especially with now the ATC that you can hook up with these different services. You can go do simulated, get a clearance, and go do the flight and program it and run it, and then do the approach and brief the approach, and amazing value. So I think I got a lot out of it for my instrument flight test, frankly, because I did that in the winter here, which is a terrible time. And I canceled 5 times. It wasn't until the 6th time that I was able to do the flight test because of weather. So that's a lot, man, to get yourself psyched up for that instrument flight test and cancel because of weather the morning of or whatever. So I flew the flight test on my sim a lot of times. Like I knew the route I was going to be doing, and I did it and I practiced it, and I just had it dialed in with the gear. The irony is that in the airplane I flew the flight test and it does not have an autopilot. So I had to hand fly the whole thing. But in the sim, I couldn't stand hand flying. So I used the autopilot in the sim because the hand flying wasn't the problem. It was just the procedural aspects of it. So almost every time I got pissed off when I try to hand fly the sim, because I can't, even under the hood, you get some feedback of some kind when you're hand flying, right? But in the sim, when you're trying to hand fly and you're looking at something else, you can suddenly be in this really wacky like attitude because it's just no feedback. It drove me crazy. So I didn't even try to hand fly the sim for my IFR practice at all, frankly. I mean, a little bit maybe for flying the needles or something on the approach, but en route or whatever, no. I just would use the autopilot. I'd pretend that I was, keeping my hand busy so I'm pretending I'm on the stick with it, but no. But yeah, for procedural training, I would definitely recommend getting, do you have some of the physical hardware?
Yeah, I've got real sim gear. I've got a
Okay.
530, a Garmin 530.
Yeah.
And I've got the gear and the throttle quadrant that I custom. I've got a Comanche, so it's non-standard throttle quadrant, non-standard 6-pack and all that. So I used Air Manager to customize. And then I used the Pilot Edge like you did with Air
Yeah.
Venture. And I think that's the best $30 I spend every month in aviation is that Pilot Edge.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean,
Yeah.
that really puts you there because there's nothing different about that. Right. That's like in a real airplane. You got to talk to a person, write down a clearance, happens in real time, and you can't pause it and you got to read it back. Like that practice is real. So that's amazing. And that's new stuff that was not there when I did my initial training years ago. So the fact that exists now is just mind blowing to me. But I mean, I guess a lot of kids just take it for granted, but that's awesome value.
Yeah. Me too. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I could follow up on that one a little bit. Jim or Steve, do you have any recommendations for a yoke that acts anything like a yoke that you actually get in an airplane? It's like super way different, and I find it almost impossible to fly with a yoke.
Yeah, I mean, there are some super expensive ones that claim to have better springs or something. I don't know. I'm kind of impressed with the Airbus stick that I've been using from Thrustmaster. It has these magnet sensors that make it really, it's actually probably the best joystick I've ever used. Dave, my technical buddy, broke down how that works and why it's good. It's I forget what this technology is called, but it's not based on springs or servos or, it's magnets or something. But honestly, man, the problem is you can't get proper feedback. So you can't really you can't practice a crosswind landing and not feel it. I don't know. So to me, and I did a lot of training in a Redbird leading up to my instrument stuff. And I used to, when we break through the clouds, I would just hit the button and say, okay, what do you want to do now? We'll go back to the fix, or because I do not have any interest in, like, there's the runway, we're good, we made it. I didn't want to spend the next 45 seconds bothering to bring this thing to the runway because it's garbage. And that's in a $45,000 Redbird.
Yeah.
And my instructor even agreed with me. He's like, yeah, a lot of the other students do want to bring it to the ground, but you're right. It's garbage. It's just so far from the right feel.
Yeah. If I can add to that, embarrassingly, Barton, I decided to spend the most money on the computer, but the next most was on the yoke. I embarrassingly spent $1,000 on my yoke.
Is it Yoko or which one did you get?
The Yoko. I got the Yoko. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd have done what you did. Got a $100 Thrustmaster, or the Honeycomb. I'm hearing is a good yoke for like.
Honestly, I have the Honeycomb. The Honeycomb. What's cool about it is it does a lot of range of motion like that other ones don't do. But I do not like it in the pitch axis. It's way too springy.
Okay.
Like it's something like 3 times more springy in the pitch axis than it is in the roll.
Yeah, I wish I'd not spent that much money on my yoke because, like you're saying, theoretically, I already know how to land the plane. I know how to flare. I need to practice instrument with the head work of my instrument approaches and dialing in the GPS and all that. That's what I'm using my sim for. So.
Okay, thank you both. That's good advice. And I think I will probably break down and get a Thrustmaster, despite the fact that my 182 doesn't have anything like it, but it's okay.
Yeah. So that's another piece of advice I've gotten from a lot of sim guys is don't try to replicate your airplane in the sim because you just will never succeed to. What you want to do is put your head in the game, and whatever that takes in the sim, do that. So, my plan is to get through this initial training, the multi IFR with that G1000 panel, and then I'm going to give it away. And then the next thing I'm going to do is get a 530 unit from Real Sim, a 750 from Real Sim Gear, because that's what I have in the RV14. And I'm going to get the GNC 500 autopilot physical interface. So I'm just going to work with the 750 and the autopilot interface with my sim and just have it sitting there on the desk with no big panel, nothing else in my way. And that's just it. I don't care what my control inputs are otherwise. I just want to really nail down using my navigator and using my autopilot on my, IFR practice. And I don't care what inputs I'm using for pedals or sticks or whatever else, because it just doesn't matter. It's just putting my head in that game of inputting flight plans and taking down clearances and thinking through that stuff.
Really wish that they would add on the G3X panel.
Yeah, I think the problem is making the touch interface is the challenge with all that stuff. But if they do, I'm excited to get that, because then I could truly build my panel almost. Right. But, again, I'm not that worried about it, right? It's like mostly what I want to manage is the navigator and the flight plan and the autopilot.
Well, you could probably simulate with the G5 in there and instead of the G3X, just because then that gives you at least you can put in your ceilings to climb to and whatnot with the G5.
Right. Yeah. So whatever I have on the screen, I guess I'm not even worried if it's physical, right? Because I can use that on the sim software wise. But I guess you're right. I could get a physical G5. That's an interesting idea.
Well, they do have a simulator G5.
Yeah. The Real Sim Gear has a physical one. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
But that would be different than my workflow in the actual airplane, right? Because I'd be sending all that stuff to the G3X normally, right?
Well, I think the G5 and the G3X, well, the G5 backs up to the G3X. So
that's right. Yeah.
If the G3X were to die, then the G5 would be the primary instrument.
Understood. Yeah. So I'm just saying, to build my workflow.
Oh yeah.
I would be sending the autopilot instructions to whatever panel I'm flying in the sim. You know what I mean? But yeah, I need to work out a workflow, which I don't have yet for that new panel. I mean, that's the episode I'm about to publish. I just cut it and sent it to the different collaborators, Garmin and so on, the panel install in the RV14. And I mean, the joke is I'm trying to work out a title actually for that one that's not clickbait, but is clickbait, because I don't know, it's the most expensive crate, right? It's like 70,000 USD in a box. It's more expensive than the airframe and the engine.
Which one is?
The panel that I got.
Oh yeah.
Because we've got two G3X screens, a 750, the GNC 500 autopilot, and I got a 255, whatever it's called, Navcom radio, because Canada requires us to have dual independent navigation for IFR. So we have to, the whole thing can shit the bed, and you still need a second setup, either an independent GPS, or I got Navcom because we couldn't fit another navigator into that panel because of the depth. So if everything went to hell, I would still have an ILS I could shoot, with like radio comm, Navcom. So yeah, that panel is like, and it's got a G5 backup. So that's like crazy, awesome, ridiculous. It's got quadruple redundancy power because we did 2 alternators, the ship battery, and then the panel battery. And I guess the G5 has some best. Was that is that more than quadruple? And then AHRS wise, we have the AHRS from the main system and then the AHRS from the G5. So it's dual backed up. And the magnometer, I guess, only gives you heading, right? So it's not AHRS. Anyway, double backed up AHRS and quadruple backup power. Like, it's insane what we're going to have in this thing. So I'm trying to figure out what to call that one, like installing my quadruple backed up $70,000
sexy panel there, and then that's clickbait.
Yeah. So I don't know. You tell me, what should I call that one? I'm leaning on something like the most expensive crate, quadruple redundant Garmin panel unboxing, whatever. I don't know. Right. Then you get too long. I don't know. Jesus, it's frustrating. I still don't know. I've done 250 of these things. I still don't know how to type them.
Don't forget the picture of the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what are your thoughts on, given the panel is so glass based, two G3X is the 750. I know what I'm doing with my ForeFlight, my iPad during that type of operation, because so much of what the iPad offers is now no longer really relevant with an iPad. What's your opinion on that?
I like the idea that I could sit there at the diner or whatever, plan it, brief it, program it, and then get in the plane and send it to the
Right,
panel.
but I'm talking about from in flight.
Yeah. So in flight, I think it's sitting there on my lap or wherever it's going to be in that airplane. And I'm probably using it as like a glance at my charts or whatever. And I brief my plates there probably because that's my workflow that I've always been used to.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see what I change, because previously ForeFlight has been the only comfort that I've had. I jump into so many planes where I'm like, I do not know anything about these goddamn avionics.
Right.
But I can make it work enough to talk on the radio and know the engine's running, and but good God, like I'm glad I have ForeFlight and I'm VFR or whatever, or I'm flying a Warbird that most of it doesn't work anyway.
Right.
So jumping in and out with that consistency of like, there's my checklist, I put that in ForeFlight. There's my charts, there's my plates. All the information quickly if I need it for the weather or the airports, like I just quickly know where to get that in ForeFlight. So I think it'll be fun to get comfortable with like quickly pulling that stuff up, like weather, and because I'm going to have Sirius XM and all these things. I guess I don't even understand how much of that works in Canada with ADSB and so on. I'm going to have all the hardware. I just need to understand what'll work here. So really this transition into this airplane is going to be figuring out a workflow and then staying consistent with it, because I don't want to be tripping over that stuff and I don't want to not be exploiting it either. So I think I am going to go to Garmin fairly early on and like go through their training program and like really document that process too. Because I do know a lot of guys that fly this type of stuff that don't know what they're doing with it. I've flown with several guys where I ask them questions about their gear and they start to realize they have it set a certain way and they're like, just don't touch it. Because I don't know if it changes screens, what the hell I'm going to do. And that's not a good place to be. But this stuff is so complicated that I can see why that happens.
I have a super specific question about your stick and the RB14. What's on it? What's the brand and what's on it?
I can't remember what the brand is. I got the one that's like shaped like this with the middle hat for trim.
Yep.
Autopilot disconnect. Flaps are going to be momentary up and full down. And then push talk. And it didn't get any other buttons on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that? Because you can add like the palm thing, and then you can add the thumb button. I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, there's too many buttons.
Too many, right? I also wanted it to be ambidextrous because I don't know. I fly both ways, right? But primacy, I started with the glider, and I really like right-hand stick, left-hand spoiler or throttle, and that's how it works in Warbird. That's how it works in Super Cub. So I do remember the first experience I had jumping into a Cessna 150 for my first power lesson, being frankly disappointed by the feel of flying with a yoke in my left hand and the stupid knob thing as a throttle. Like I was like, this is not, what is this? So I've always fought with not loving that, but I obviously got used to it over the years. But I'm considering I might fly that airplane from the right seat just so that I can be stick right, throttle left. But I'll go either way. But yeah, I wanted the sticks to be ambidextrous to answer that question. Yeah.
We're about 2 months behind you. I can't wait to see yours at Oshkosh. And
where are you based?
Based at
Colorado.
And well, it's KCFO now, but airplanes in Arizona. So, but we're getting
cool. So I can't remember what the brand of that stick is though. It's the one that's in the factory RB14. The 14A at the factory has a different one, and I didn't like it. The trim was like below the flap thing.
Yeah.
So you had to
I saw that video where you had a hard time operating that.
Didn't like it. And I think that one didn't have a momentary flap either. So you had to like, you
Oh,
kind of had to do it with two hands or something. It was really stupid.
I tell
So I was
you
like,
actually said that during the video.
I was like 100% not getting this stick. So I mean, yeah, it's cool to be able to check things out and just know, like, I know what I don't like,
Yeah.
or learn that something could be different. But I definitely knew I didn't want a fighter pilot one-way stick that you have to grip in this silly way with a zillion buttons. Like,
Right.
the one disappointment was I wanted to get the toga on the throttle, which we just couldn't do for wiring reasons, because we also didn't do knob throttles. I did a console, like we got this pretty cool custom thing with
Yeah.
console throttle. So that's fun, but that's been a challenge because we had to do custom control cables and it took 2 shots. Hopefully the second shot is going to get it right, because the throws are so difficult to get right. Because even when you measure everything, when you snake the control cable through the firewall, I guess it slightly changes. So the throws weren't working. We were not getting our full range.
Yeah, we're
And it's
giving
like,
up on that. We can't figure it out. We're going to do the Berniers and then go back later, maybe.
yeah, that's fair enough, right?
Hard, yeah.
I just knew I wanted levers. Because of formation flying and stuff, it's really difficult to do that with verniers. It's just not a natural position to be in, I don't think. And that's definitely something we want to do. I want to fly with the fleet, and do formation stuff, and be a camera ship or whatever. And yeah, I just really wanted the levers. So we did get the first one by Aerosport. God, somebody comes and trying to work with. But I'll be sharing all that. So we figured it out. It's the same one that they had been doing in RV10s. They just tweaked it. It's slightly different size.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, we got the first one. It's a carbon fiber,
Nice.
awesome, with like a flip up thing for your armrest, and then the headset jacks on the back of it. So it's gonna be pretty sweet.
Can't wait to see that. Sorry for hogging the airspace, guys.
Any other questions or?
Anybody else got anything out there, members?
Forward to seeing it at Oshkosh.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna I can't get a haircut still here. And at this point, it's gotten past that stupid stage, and it's actually like, I'm feeling like 70s rock star, and I might go with it. So I don't know. I'm gonna have some crazy long hair at Osh, man. I don't know when.
Speaking at Osh, are you gonna be speaking in any webinars or workshops?
We might do a thing about the experience of the build, but I've been really struggling with what to do, because I don't know. I'm not comfortable with asking people to gather indoors or whatever. Like, a lot of the sponsors aren't asking us. Say again.
This is Jim Hogan. Do you hear me?
Go ahead. Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah, I was asking you what kind of engine you're putting in your RV-14, and are you the guy that had all the statistics about how you were comparing this plane statistics with a bunch of others to decide to buy this airplane and put it together?
I don't think I did a lot of statistics stuff, but I did an episode about the decision to go with the Thunderbolt IO390 Lycoming. So we got one where we talked about the difference between certified and experimental. That's the title, something like that: certified versus experimental engines. If you want to check that one out, maybe you guys can share the link. Maybe if you want. The thumbnail is a pretty sexy looking thumbnail of the engine, and that's the case where it got some good views because that was kind of sexy clickbait. But I mean, it's a good conversation, right? So. What's interesting though, it's kind of a cheat because Lycoming is certified, let's be honest, right? It's not Rotax or whatever else. So it's this interesting place to be where it's an experimental version of a very tried and tested through certified engine. The only difference is we're more free. I guess the Thunderbolt does stuff like the port and polish and the options for the EIS ignition and so on that the certified don't get. So I think we're going to have like a 230 horsepower engine is what it's looking like because of all the stuff. And for that airplane, it's going to be ridiculous.
I have a Beach Musketeer Super 3 with the IO360 fuel injection in it. And but this is a bigger engine that you're putting in this one then. I'm not familiar with that bigger engine. I haven't heard it.
Well, it's basically a 360, Paul. It's just, I guess, bored out, right? I don't think there's a lot of differences between the 360 and 390, is there?
But I don't know because I don't know about that. I just have had this airplane since 1967.
Wow,
and it's
same one. That's amazing.
same airplane with the same engine, and
Did you
I
get
had to
new?
have it overhauled a couple
Sure. Yeah.
years ago. The same engine, and I just have about 2,000 hours on the
Wow.
whole airplane. But that one
Wow.
gentleman that was said he started out with a Cessna 140. Well, 40, 50 years ago, I got my instrument rating on a Cessna 140 at Clinton Aviation in Denver, but I had a Cessna 120, and he probably knows what that was like. It was like the 140, but it didn't have flaps, and when I got it, it didn't have a generator or a battery or a
No,
starter.
that's the pure way to go, man.
And I flew it from Durango to Denver to where I lived in Denver when I worked over there at Fort Lewis College back in those days. That's over the mountains here at 14,000 feet. But I got along all right with the Cessna 120 for 13 years, and
Wow.
and I flew in my job for 4.5 years with him for about 1,300 hours on the Cessna 120 back in those
Wow.
days. But that's but you talked about the T6. I got in Air Cadets, and I was down in Florida with all those lakes and so forth. And I was in the T6, and I just couldn't. I was in cadets, and I had about 40 demeanors and so forth. And anyway, they washed me out after about 30 hours of trying to learn how to fly the T6.
30
So
hours.
I wanted to mention that it was hard to ever get used to how hard you had to push on the rudders to keep it going straight.
Well, our guys, the rule at our museum was if you can't solo it in 5, you're not gonna, which is a lot of pressure, but that's kind of the way they looked at it, was they want to see you come prepared and they want to see you get done within 5 hours. You're going solo.
Yeah.
In the air.
And
I think you get tripped out.
I hated him in the back seat.
Yeah. Well, because you probably got past that point. That's a long time to not go because they think you won't get the confidence. Because I was super stressed and you probably were too. But
it didn't get enough sleep.
You don't get the confidence.
At 5 o'clock in the morning. There was 15 minutes. It was in Florida. You was soaking wet by the time you
sweat.
were.
Yeah, that's no fun.
No air conditioning back in those days. That was in 1951.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 1952. I was in Air Force from 1951 to 1955. Yeah, that's as much as I want to take time, but it's interesting to listen to what all you guys are saying. And now I just transferred my musketeer to my boy, who has an instrument rating, and we put $27,000 in the engine and $28,000 in all this modern stuff in the last 2 years or 3 years. We had it to get the engine overhauled here in Canyon City, where I live. It took 2 years. My mechanic, he was flying part-time for the Forest Service and so forth, and it was hard to keep him on the ball to finally get this all this stuff done for the overhaul of the engine and everything that went along with it. A new radios and everything.
It's a lot.
A new fuel injector. I remember that three different times the fuel injector had quit on me. Maybe I didn't warm up the airplane enough, but I was lucky to get back to the field. But I was by myself and didn't have too much weight on the airplane, so that worked out okay. I wouldn't be here if it didn't.
I guess not.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we're gonna wrap it up. I'd like to thank Steve for taking the time to spend with the Colorado Pilots Association. It's been an amazing night, and thank you very much.
Yeah, no
thank you for
problem.
your time.
Glad we got
Yes,
it.
I will echo that too.
Thank
Thanks very
you.
much, Steve. It's a very interesting presentation and discussion.
Yeah, no
Bye.
problem. Glad to share. All right, have a good night, guys.
All right, thank you.